When building a scene with multiple dynamic objects, you can start to kind of get a clutter, and you may not want each one to affect the other. You might want to isolate different dynamic objects, and there's a way to do that using groups. So I thought we could take a look at that. I'm going to go ahead and come over to Items, Add Dynamic Object, and create a particle emitter. And we'll just go ahead and use the default name and click OK. Let's come over to etc. Actually, let's just do motion. For motion, I'm going to say 5 meters in the Y, and that's pretty fast, so I'll just do 3. Push play, and that'll work. Okay, so now that we have that, let's throw in some collision objects to interact with the particles. So I'm going to come over to Items, Add Dynamic Collision, and we'll just use default. And what I'm going to do is move this particle emitter, say right here. Okay, and when I scrub through, the particles are going to bounce off of it. Okay, let's go ahead and with this object selected, we could create another, we could go over and add another collision object, but I'm just going to clone the one I have here, and I'm going to move it up, say, to here, and scrub through, and now the particles are hitting both of the collision objects and moving around them. Okay, now let's just add one more emitter. I'm just going to grab this emitter and clone that, and I'm going to move this emitter over to here so that it bounces off of this second collision object. Okay, now what if this is the look that I wanted, except I didn't want this collision object to affect this particle emitter? Okay, well, what I can do is I can isolate these items using groups. So let's go over and check out the group option. So with this particle emitter selected, I'm going to hit P for properties, and actually I'm going to move this over to the side so we can see both. Click so that I can get to the options, and for group it's set to default. Now the thing to know about default is it can be seen by every dynamic object in the scene, so it can affect every dynamic object in the scene. So I'm going to take this particle emitter and I'm going to make a new group, and I'm going to call it effects 01. Okay, and I want this collision object to be in this group. So I don't want this collision object to affect this particle emitter. So I'll just set that to effects 01. Okay, and now let's scrub through, and we see that this is still being affected by this. Well, why is that? I made these different groups. It should only look in this group. Well, the thing is that this collision object is set to default. Okay, and when it's set to default, everything can see it. Okay, so it includes all groups. So what I'm going to do is set this into its own group. So we'll go to new group, and I'll call this effects 02. Okay, and let's take a look. Now when I scrub through, this particle emitter is being affected by this collision object, but not this one. And let me take this particle emitter and set it to effects 02 so that it'll be affected by that. Okay, so let's just take a quick look. I'm going to scrub through, and I can see that these two items right here are in one group, and these two items right here are in one group, but notice that the particles here aren't being affected by this collision object. So you can isolate just by setting up various groups. If I included another collision object and I wanted both these particle emitters to be affected by it, I would just leave the setting at default so that it would include both of these groups. Okay, now this is not limited to collision objects and particle emitters. If I go over to P for properties and see that it is an option for the particle emitter, I'm just going to add cloth, and you can see a group there. I'm going to add hard, and you can see a group there. I'm going to add a wind emitter, and you can see it's got a group. collision and gravity. If we come over to gravity, it's got a group. So all the different dynamic options are going to have the group feature, which allows us full control over what is being affected by what. So it comes in really handy when you've got multiple dynamic objects in a scene, and it's as simple as just isolating it with a group.